Hi, I'm Louie. I've been asked by my buddy Jordan to do a video on how to upgrade a PC. I'm pretty sure my buddy Eddie may like this as well. We're going to do step by step on how you can upgrade components easily. It's not that hard, anyone can do it. I've been running a business now for 10 years, so I do it on a daily basis. Hope you guys like it and give me feedback. Thanks. This is a PC that we're going to be working on. We're just going to take a quick shot of it and just to show you all the components. We're going to first start off with the memory. They consider it as random access memory, so it's RAM. This is what was installed previously. It's just a single stick. This is a single 1 GB stick, and they do come in variants of single-sided and dual-sided DIMMs. Reasons for that is to add more memory. So each one of these has a specific set, and then what they will do is they'll add additional to the back, and this would become a 2 gig stick instead of a 1 gig stick. And then this is what we have currently upgraded and installed. Now this will be a gaming rig, that's why the RAM has heat spreaders on them. So they're green, they come in different colors, and this is from Wintech. See if it'll focus in. If it doesn't, it's fine. Wintech makes AMP series. This is DDR2. They have newer RAM, but we decided to go with this because of the motherboard. We didn't really want to spend and invest too much money. We just wanted to upgrade just minimal components. And next we'll move on to the graphics card. This is a 9600 GT. It is made by Galaxy. There's multiple different variations of companies NVIDIA makes the chipsets on the boards. They come with different amounts of memory. They come with different clock speeds, different processor types. This one specifically is a gaming graphics card. We're going to remove it and we will show you what it looks like. We're going to start off with removing the graphics card. It's very important that you look at any attached power supply cables such as this. This has a 6-pin power connector. Reason being is it needs additional power to run the processor. It's very easily removable. You pull the pin, apply force here, wiggle it, and it slides right out. As you can tell, it's a 6-pin. The black is the ground, and the yellow is a 12-volt connection. The other ones that are the red is usually power or 5 volts. At times they can become 3 volts, like this orange one may be a 3 volt. It just depends on the manufacturer of the power supply, which we will be upgrading as well. But we're just going to focus on removal of the graphics components right now. It's very simple. If you look on the inside, there's a screw, usually a Phillips head. Yours may have different variations. Some of them are toolless. This isn't. It's an older case. We're just upgrading specific components. So, screwdriver, Phillips, any brand, any manufacturer. Just make sure it's not too small, not too large. All you do is you grab the front of it, connect it to the screw, and then we will be removing it. Screw it counterclockwise, lefty loosey, righty tighty, and that's the easiest way. This removes, put it off to the side. There is a release latch on the inside, which you have to stay focused to. There isn't a lot of wiggle room in here. It's underneath, so most of them won't have this. This is the front side bus, heat spreader for the north bridge. What that does is it controls the memory speeds, the clock speeds. We had to add a fan to it because it was overheating. So it doesn't leave us enough room to get our fingers in here to remove anything. So you can try to wiggle your hand in here on the left side. If you can't get to it, you can wiggle your hand on the right side, and then slides right out. And this is the original graphics card. It's pretty thick, has multiple inputs. Every graphics card has different inputs. This is DVI. I'm not sure if it's dual link. Dual link will do higher resolutions. This is HDMI, of course. It does audio as well. And then TV, which is just S-video. These are the two separate graphics cards. This is the original 9600 GT that was installed, and this is the new EVGA GTX 550 Ti. The Ti stands for titanium. NVIDIA makes different types of cards. The titanium means that it's a little bit higher in clock speeds. EVGA is the manufacturer of this specific card, such as Galaxy is the manufacturer of this card. The variations in these cards, as you can tell, is the thickness is almost identical. The boards are always going to be this thin. The internal components are different. The difference between the GTX 550 and the 9600 is, this is an older card, lower clock speeds. The GTX is a newer card. It's not the newest thing out right now, but for gaming, it's got a 192-bit interface, which that is just how it processes the memory. This has a higher bit rate, but a slower clock speed. So the processor's a lot slower on this than it is on this. This actually has more memory. So this has 2 gigs of RAM, random access memory. This has 1 gig. If someone would ask, hey, you know, if it's 2 gig or 1 gig, what's the major difference? More memory is good. There's a big difference in these 2 cards. This is DDR3 memory. This is DDR5. DDR5 is a newer standard, a lot faster, greater for gaming, video encoding. It's a lot larger, it's a lot cheaper. This is becoming obsolete. You can't really play too many games with decent frame rate. A specific build, we can get away with it for just quite some time. It's about time the system gets upgraded. We're not going to be installing this card right away. We have to remove the motherboard, so we will show you how the installation process goes again. But I wanted to show you the back of these cards to show you the different types and how the motherboard layouts are. You'll notice that if you end up upgrading them, they do a U or upside down U or house pattern. They do that because of the heat sinks. Since they're circular in motion, they have to remain around the chip. Now this is where the die would be the processor. On the opposite side of this board is where the GTX 550 Ti processor goes. These are the memory chips. Now each motherboard, as you can tell, the difference between these two are this one has more, and this manufacturer specifically is Hynix, and this one is Samsung. They have different manufacturer chips. It's okay. I prefer to have Samsung. Hynix is the major leading one. Hyundai actually makes the Hynix chips, if you've never known that, or Hynix, or I just say Hynix. It's just what it spells. It's H-Y-N-I-X, and this is Samsung memory. So if you can tell, this is a GeForce GTX 550 superclocked. Superclock means that the chips have already been overclocked, and what overclocking means, you're increasing the speeds of the processors to get more performance out of them. This card has had a custom BIOS rebuilt by myself. EVGA motherboard, every motherboard, even the one that's including into here, has a BIOS revision, which you can tell is, it may tell you on this one will tell you. It says BIOS and then a version. It's the information on the motherboard. It tells it how to work. What we do here is at Louie's Custom PCs by myself is I rework the BIOS and I do even more overclocking, more stability. I adjust the RAM chip speeds and create a fully custom card, something that you can't purchase. So if that's something you would be interested in, please get a hold of me. At the end of the video, I will provide all my information with any questions you may have. But this is the one we will be putting in the system. They both have 6-pin connectors like we showed earlier. Since we are upgrading the power supply, this chip on here, the processor, needs more power than this does to run. A reason being is this is a lot more horsepower for gaming and processing, and with the additional RAM, it needs more power to function. So we will be showing you the installation of how that works. This is a PCI Express connection. As you can tell that there's different pins that are missing. There's no difference. Most of the time they don't really use all of them, but in order to utilize costs and to cut down on the copper usage, instead of filling all the gaps compared to this, they just remove the non-functioning gaps. There's some that are missing. It's okay. That's just it's just for the bus, just to read it and read the speeds. No variation in difference. There's another component that NVIDIA does if you weren't aware. This is an SLI bridge or SLI connection. What it does is conjoins both cards to run as one single card. They share the same processing. Now it's better if you run SLI with 2 identical cards. Unfortunately, this specific motherboard isn't an SLI. It does not have 2 connections. As such, these are PCI Express. If they had 2 on the motherboard, then you can run 2 identical cards. If we had 2 GeForce 9600 GTs identical or the same type of chipset, you can run an SLI bridge. This is what an SLI bridge looks like. There's different variations of it. This is a hard motherboard based one, and they have differences in length, width, and size. Now this is just for 2 cards. This is a flexible board. It's a ribbon cable. That one is a harder motherboard. They're both made by Asus, MSI, There's different manufacturers that make these. And this is only if you need a little bit more flexibility, if their motherboard doesn't leave you enough room, or the case just has a lot of restrictions. I have these because I do different custom rigs and builds, but it's always good to have different variations in the specific project to make sure you have the right tool for the job. Now, how these work are, these would go into the motherboard side by side, the flexible ribbon cable, or the hard version, you would slide these over top of the connection. This would go here, and then they're now conjoined as one card. Now what this does is if you have two identical cards, they work as one unit together. Windows registers both cards, but it registers under NVIDIA drivers as a single unit, so they do multi-processing together. Easiest way to explain it is it's like having dual core system with as easy as a ribbon cable. Your motherboard must support it in order for this to happen. If you look at our motherboard, this does not. It only has one PCI Express connection and two PCI. These are PCIs, they're usually in white, they vary in color. This is a 1x PCI Express. Now if you had a single slot of a PCI Express times 16, they do make PCI 1x graphics cards. There's multiple manufacturers, NVIDIA and ATI. So if you would have a single slot and another card here, you can run SLI. It's just at a slower clock speed. So hopefully that'll sum up some of the differences in graphics card. I mean, it varies. There's a lot of information. We can't cover everything on this video. It's just to show you a little bit of our knowledge in what we're doing, and hopefully gets you into understanding what components do and how they work. Okay, just in addition, they do make heat sinks. These are made specifically for your graphics card. GPU is graphics processing unit, and they make them in different colors variations. This is aluminum. They make them in solid copper. There's double-sided stickies, 3M on the back side. And what you would do is you would open this package, and if you see the chips on here, these are the memory chips that we had spoken about earlier. These go over top of this. Now the ones on the inside, you can barely see the bottom possibly. They're on the inside of the motherboard. They don't need them because at times the heatsink, this big metal thing on the inside, touches these. Now the more expensive cards will have a back plate, full aluminum back plate that covers the back and covers the chips, as well as the ones on the inside. There's ones that are on the other side of this. But that's just to show you that there are ways. If you're getting an extreme overclocking, this is the way to go. Chips must be cool at all times. That's why it's good to run under specific temperatures. These components have to run under cool, especially when they're being extremely tested or running under stressful situations. But this is an additional step that you can do to really push the limits of your graphics card if you so choose to do so. We're going to go ahead with the removal process of the motherboard. How we do that is you're going to need a Phillips head. Each motherboard has different types of screws, different kinds of thread patterns, and we're also going to need wire snips. These are easily purchased anywhere. We just got these because if you can tell right here, we sort of wire manage. A lot of the newer motherboards have space behind it. Fortunately, this case does not have that. So we're going to try to make this process as quick as possible. We're limited on time, but we're going to try to make this a simple step for everyone to understand. We're going to go ahead and remove the network card, and then the rest of it is removing cables and removing some screws. So we're going to start and go ahead with that. So you come over here, just like we did with the graphics card, put it in counterclockwise, lefty loosey, righty tighty, remove the screw, put it on the side. Then these don't have a clip, as you can tell right here where the graphics card was, where I was explaining where the latch is. This is to hold the graphics card in place. There's some motherboards don't have them, this one does, and this is just a lot easier. There's no latch on this side. So all you do is a little bit of force, lift up, and remove the card. Watch out for different ribbon cables. This is a ribbon for the DVD drive, different layouts on the motherboard. This is just a standard Ethernet card. They have gaming performance ones. This is a gigabit. We'll break down what they do in components in another video, but that's just simple. There's different cards. You can get Wi-Fi cards. This is just an Ethernet card. So we're going to put this to the side. We're going to go ahead and start with the fans. This is a 3-pin fan connector. It's attached to the motherboard right here. All it is, slide it up. And it has a groove, so as you can tell, it can only go in one way. It has like a little latch and a little groove. And on the motherboard it has 3 pins. They vary, especially when you come up to the heatsink fan. We're going to be upgrading this. That's why we're removing the motherboard, or else we would leave the motherboard on its place. We're upgrading the processor today. This is a dual core. We're going to be upgrading it with a quad core. It's a lot larger. This fan will not do the cooling that we need for the new processor. It's just not substantial cooling that we're really looking for. So we went ahead and ordered this. This is a solid copper heatsink. This is made for really beefy processors. These look like headers on a vehicle because that's exactly how it works out. There's liquid inside, almost like coolant. What happens is the shiny surface goes on top of the processor, and the fan flows and keeps everything nice and cool. And if you can see, it's a figure 8 pattern, so it's guaranteed to keep it cool at all times. It does almost like an infinity sign. And here is for the automatic fan controller. Now some of these have a fan controller. This has an electronic fan controller. It tells it exactly when to ramp up when heat starts to get hot. These have 4 pins, as you can tell, compared to a fan on your motherboard, which just has 3 pins. The additional pin is for the data. The data is to tell the computer, okay, now you need to register these specific fan speeds and whether or not to ramp and how to ramp up. These don't have that function. It's just power. Now the white on here, as you can tell, they're different colors. White is usually the data. But you can buy additional fan controllers. This one's already built into it. We will show you here when we go to take apart the motherboard and remove the fan for the processor. We're going to be removing the I/O headers. We're going to start on the bottom half. As you can tell, the upper components are still attached. We're going to try to take one step at a time. This is for the HD audio. These are very simple. You just look at the connector and you just lift them. They only go in one way. It'll tell you on here exactly where they go. This is audio. And if you look on the motherboard, I'm not sure if you can really see anything, but this cable's in the way. It actually states audio on there. There's only one way it can fit. If you can see this little white stopper on here, keeps getting away from me. That white stopper prevents you from putting this in the wrong connection port. There's different ones. As you can tell here, there's a different jumper right here. It can only go in one way. This has a specific connection and specific amounts of ports just for this. So just find the right connection, read the motherboard layout, and it should be very simple. Now this is just a standard audio. They do make HD audio ones that have this pin layout different. So bear that in mind. There's also an additional USB front header. They change in color. This is for a FireWire port, 1394 connection. See how you can tell the differences in these connections where I was trying to explain earlier. See that white pin? They don't match. If you try to put this onto this connection, it won't fit. That pin will stop it from going in the wrong place. So they do that for preventative maintenance. Back in the day they didn't have that, so it's a good thing that they're doing that. So keep that in mind. This is for the DVD drive. This is just a ribbon cable. It's usually labeled in colors in blue. Sometimes they have lettering on here that says specifically to the drive or hard drive or motherboard. This one doesn't have it. All you do is just lift very careful. See, these have specific pins. They also have the block stop right there, so you can't put it in the wrong way, as well as this has a latch up top. It goes over top of that, and it only goes in one way. So if you look down here, it has a stopper right here as well. It's got a little groove, and that prevents it, and then there's that little pin out for that. So don't try to force anything. If you run into any problems, just take your time. You don't want to break any components. We're moving on to the front USB as well. This is just a USB connection. Now, as you can see, these, the 1394 port and the USB port, are the same exact connectors. Sometimes the motherboard will have a label for 1394. This one does not. Oh, actually this one does. I'm sorry. This has a different color. Just look for the 1394. But if you just have a USB, you can put an additional USB in the 1394. That's just for the motherboard. So these read out. The pinout's the same, you can put them in the same connection. So don't be afraid if you don't see a USB header or just 1394. So those will fit in the same spots. But since this motherboard specifically states 1394 and USB, you want to put them in the right connections. So we're moving on to the SATA connections. There's 6 on the motherboard. There's 2 currently installed. Since we're not upgrading the operating system, it boots off of whichever the SATA connection goes to. So just remember where they are. There's different numbers on the motherboard. They say SATA 1 through 6. The ones that are usually in a group, you'll see them, they'll be in a group together. They'll label them, or they'll be off to the side somewhere in some of the newer motherboards. They do that for RAID. RAID is when you're running 2 hard drives together. Now certain manufacturers, this motherboard is manufactured by Intel. NVIDIA has their Enforce chipsets and AMD has their chipsets for how to run the specific processors. This is for the front side of the bus. Now these are labeled, they all have SATA 1 through 6 because there's 6 connections here. It's very important that you focus on remembering which one goes where. If you go to boot and they're in the wrong connection, Windows will tell you that they won't find the boot manager or boot loader or boot partition. So if that ever happens to you when you're rebuilding, make sure that you write down where they go. Now these SATA cables specifically have preventative release latches, so these aren't easily removed. You have to push the pin in to release it. These are really good to invest in. Some of the newer ones are just made out of all plastic. These are metal. And if you take a look at over here for the hard drive, that's where it attaches to. It's a serial connection, and this does the data transfer. This is the new standard. This is the old standard. It went from this IDE to a high data transfer SATA cable. Not only does it save space, it's twice as fast. So this is just for the DVD drive. If you still have an IDE hard drive, it'll only run at 133 megahertz. These will do up to 6 gigabit connections. The newer ones data transfer that high. This specific motherboard only does 3, but they vary, so it's okay. We're just got to remember where these go. And since this one doesn't have anything, you can leave them on if you want. We're just going to remove them in this case. What you do is you put your hand through here, grab the latch from the inside. This one's actually upside down. Lift it, and they remove. Now you see how this end doesn't have the other connection? You'll find these types of cables at times. You always want to run this one into the motherboard. This one doesn't really move. This is for the SATA connection for the hard drives. These are easier to get to, and in order to remove these or prevent these from moving in case the side panel's open, you see this? You can't move it out. Even if you try to force it, it won't move. You have to push the pin in, and then it releases. Put it back in. Hear that click? It's not going anywhere. So be very careful. There's pins in here. You don't want to break anything. Sometimes they're really flimsy and kind of crappy. But we're just going to remove this one. We don't need it in here. We'll put this to the side. This one we know that we removed from the SATA hard drive, and it's in the very first slot. So we know that where it is, so we're just going to want to replace it. Now this one looks to be the same way as the other cables, so you can lift it. Just don't yank on them. If you feel tugged, then it probably has a release system. And you can tell there's 2 different types. It's okay, as long as the data speeds. They do make different data speeds. The only difference is they're different gauge cabling. Foxconn is a major, company. It's always good to stick with name brands. A lot of the Chinese manufacturers, not to, really talk bad about them. They do make, cheap cables, and they're inexpensive. But if you stick with name brands, Foxconn's been out for years. They manufacture motherboards. Almost every part in this connect down here on the I/O plate on the back side. of the motherboard. A lot of these components are made from Foxconn. They make a lot of the chipsets that you would need, but I'm going to put them to the side. We're running into an important part here. Now this is for the front power, reset switch, and the LEDs. This is called the front panel. Now the reasons why you want to really focus on this is if they're backwards or upside down, the lights won't work. If they're reversed, the switches will work at times. There's different types of connections. This is a power LED, it has a space, so what I usually do is I take a picture with my phone or write it down, because there's different pinouts for specific cabling. Every motherboard will have a different setup. Every case will have different front panel header ports. So you want to bear in mind that there's difference in colors. Normally the motherboard has exactly where they go, or they have a little pin that sits over top of these, so you can just pull these off, attach it to that, and then slide it right down. Not all manufacturers do that. This is an OEM board. A lot of these were run as servers or development boards, so they weren't really easily purchased. You could have bought them from different manufacturers on the internet, but I have two identical boards as such. So easiest way is just take a photo of the front panel, jumpers over here, and we're going to remove these. Be very careful. You'll see these by themselves. This is for the BIOS settings. If you ever screw something up, you can remove this, move it over one pin, and it'll reset your BIOS settings for overclocking or any changes you've made to the BIOS. If you don't know what a BIOS is, you know, it's good that you're watching it so you learn. There's a lot of these components you don't want to tamper with if you don't know what they do. So make sure that you're very careful when you're pulling these, that these don't get removed. Your motherboard may not start, it may beep, just bear that in mind when you're removing these. Now this is a tie down. These are old standard, you know, they do sell them. They're just twisty ties on 3M tape on the back. Just twist it, and then just pull these right out. And then we're just going to pull the fan. Now this fan had to be modified. They don't make a fan for this chipset. This was actually removed from a cooling fan for Xbox 360. What we did was we just soldered on cable, and then we put just a standard 2-pin, and then what we do then is we just put it right on the motherboard, and then what that does is just gives power to the fan, and it just, when the motherboard starts up, it makes sure that the front chips are staying cool. Now we were having issues with this specific board. We don't really have anything to screw onto here. Thankfully there's plastic latches. We did little cable ties, zip ties, and that held everything down. It's not going anywhere. The speed keeps everything cool. It dropped almost 20-30 degrees. It was running almost 70-80, which is not really good, especially running in a case. So we'll remove that. Here's the 4-pin for the power connection here. Just there's a pin right here, just like it was on the graphics card. Push it in, lift it, and as you can tell, it's just a 4-pin connection. Here's the 4-pin for the fan. Now we're going to leave that one on, so we remove the motherboard. There it is right there. We went ahead and we removed the memory. How you remove them is, all these cables out of the way, that's why we do cable management. These latches come out. We'll put them on right now just to show you. Slide them outward, and then there's grooves as well. There's a latch right in the middle is a groove that prevents you from putting the RAM in backwards or putting the wrong memory standard in place. So what happens is, this is the old memory. I'll just use this one for example. As you can tell, if they don't line up, it's because you're putting them in wrong. But it happens to the best of us. Slide it through. Start with one side and then head to the other. So push this side in. See how it's like this? Just to show you, it's going in the wrong way. You'll see it balance, and it's because the groove isn't lining up. This is on the bottom half, the groove's on the top half. All you do is you flip it this way. If you try to flip it like toast upside down, it's not going to work. So make sure the pins are on the bottom. Put it in the right direction. Once you hear it click, click on the back side, it's in place. If it's doing a seesaw like you just saw, it's not going to work. You don't want to do that, because if you don't have it set properly and you go to start it, you may fry the chips or you may cause damage to the motherboard. Once it's all finished, grab the latches on the outside, push them in place, and you're done. Now the reason why we removed them is we're going to be upgrading them. We had the green ones in here before. This is only a 1 gig stick. We upgraded to 8 gig. It was originally 3 gigs in here. As you can tell, here we'll remove them. The removal process is simple. Pull the latches outward, pull the latch outward, and then lift. There you go. Now if you take a look at the motherboard, you will see that there's different colors. There's black and there's blue. This specific motherboard does dual channeling. Almost like when we spoke about the SLI bridging with the NVIDIA cards. If you have memory that are identical, they come in packs of 2. You match the colors. It'll do dual channel. So it'll do blue with blue, put the cards only specifically in there for the memory chips. Good thing about this specific motherboard, even if they're not the same manufacturers, a lot of motherboards force you to have to pick the same speeds of the same manufacturers, or they won't run dual channel mode. Match the sticks with the channels and it'll run in dual channel. You'll benefit a lot for performance because they're running together as one unit instead of individual units. So just keep that in mind. Future reference, if you're looking to upgrade, buy a dual channel kit. But these, we're just going to push them back in. And we're going to go ahead and remove the power from here. Sometimes you have to apply some force, so put your hand, hold it down, lift it. There's a latch on here as well. They do have different power pin connectors. This goes to the power supply. We are going to be switching the power supply. So just to show you, this is a 20 plus 4 pin. This gets attached to the end. Sometimes they slide up, sometimes they slide out. This one slides upward. It won't come off, don't force it. But you can add an additional 4 pins, more pins for power. That's 24 pins. If yours is 20, it's okay. If you have a 24 pin connector, you can still put that even if it hangs off a little bit to the side. This is specifically 24 for removing this, so it's fine. Just keep that in mind. It only goes in one way. It prevents you with the stopper, and just make sure that there's a lip on here. You fill a lip on the side, on the back side you won't fill a lip. This is what holds the latch in place. So we'll move this out of the way. This right here is for the floppy drive. Yes, a floppy drive. It's old standard. Motherboard's fine. The reason why we keep this is we do a lot of BIOS for older computers, and you need a floppy drive to upgrade BIOS information for older laptops and or installing specific versions of Windows. We have a USB to floppy, but this already has it built in, so when we're doing custom chips for specific clients, anything like that, we have it already on board. If yours doesn't have one, you don't really need it. Everything now is all run USB. So same process as the ribbon cable for the DVD drive. Just lift it. This one doesn't have a jumper or a little stopper part here, but it does have grooves to keep it in place. Sometimes they just have grooves just because when they manufacture them, the machines come and press this over. But if this doesn't have it, this has a pin out the same way where it has a stop pin. So you'll see that it's blocked. So you can't put it in wrong. This just comes out of the way. And then now we will go on with the removal process of the power supply. You can do this either or. You can do it now or afterwards. We're removing it now because it's kind of in the way and we're going to be upgrading it. It'll be a lot easier to remove the motherboard this way. It's your option depending on your situation. Make sure that all the components are removed from any internal components that are maybe attached. So this is a power for the SATA. It's very thin. SATA hard drives, they make SATA DVD drives. This is just a power connection. You'll see 4 pins in a second. This is for the disk drive. Some hard drives may have them with it. Slide them out. They only go in one way. These only go in one way. See the shape of them? This looks like a little house where it's a little weird shape. And then this has a groove. So See if we can focus the camera in. It has like a little L. It's a notch. You can only put it in one way, and if you take a look here on the motherboard, they have grooves. They're always in, so you can't misplace them. It comes in and then down, and then in and then down. And then over here has a 4-pin for the drive. We're not going to remove the ribbon because it's going to stay on there, but we're going to cut the zip tie from here, or the cable tie. This is to keep the cables from touching the fans. These slide out and they usually touch components and they always get in the way. Like I had stated previously, this motherboard doesn't have any compartments in the back of it to do cable management, so you just try to do the best you can by sticking the cables inside empty ports, and that way it's out of the way. It keeps breathing room for the inside of the case in here. Keeps the fans flowing and making sure it prevents dust from getting tangled inside. All you do is you grab a tool, pliers, dikes, whichever one you want to call them, wire snips, what I call them. Cut through, make sure you don't cut the cable, so be conscious of where you're cutting. If not, you'll cut into the power. Always make sure the switch is off and make sure there's no cable being attached. You don't want to cause more harm than good. Once you snip the cable, very conscious of where you put this. Don't leave it inside the case and forget it's in there. If you turn it on, it's not a good sight. You don't want this, especially this is being metal. Some of them have handles. We do this just to prevent static, but you know, this tool can be purchased anywhere. Put this to the side, and then we're going to start removing only the cables for the power supply. They're the very colorful ones. This has a braided power cable. You'll take notice of the new power supply having braiding. What this does, it manages this shambles mess this is put into. They have zip ties here from the manufacturer. This just runs through a sleeve and it looks pretty. And this has a weird pattern on it, but it keeps everything nice and neat. So what we want to do is you want to pull any additional cables from here. Like I said, it's better managed if you just put the empty spaces in your case. We're going to remove the 4 pins from the floppy drive. Put these up. Make sure there's nothing else attached. Like an eye-paste, this just won't leave us alone. Put these towards the back. We're going to push this over. And then with the Phillips head yet again, we're going to go ahead and remove. Now there's 4 of them. There's only one way to put these in. There's grooves. If you put it upside down, you'll take notice on the new power supply, there's a fan on the bottom. So the fan has to go this way. If this power supply has multi-directional, you'll notice that there's holes on both sides, up here and here. Then you can flip it upside down. In cases where this has a specific notch cut out to the case, you may want to flip it upside down. You always want to keep it in the right direction at all times. That's how it's fed through. Take it, unscrew it. Take all 4 out. If you need help, always ask someone. It's always good to have additional help when you're doing projects like this. Ask someone who has experience in it. Be very careful that you hold it like I just did. Put my hand on the inside before I move the screw, because this will flop down. What you do is you push it in. Sometimes they have a tray that slides out. In this case it doesn't. Just slide it into the case. We're going to go ahead and remove it. What you do is you push back, slide it forward, and then lift it straight out. Make sure the cables don't tangle or grab on anything. Slide it right out. Now this specific power supply doesn't have a fan. The one we will be replacing it with does on the bottom. So just we're going to remove this, pull it out of the way. And see how here it's nice and open. New power supply is actually a little bit larger, so just make sure you have clearance depending on the size of power supply you get. They make small ones, they make large ones. The higher wattage, they're a lot larger. We're not putting anything in place because we're focusing on the motherboard. Make sure there's nothing in the way. Then we're going to take your Phillips head, and now they do have power tools. You want to do this by hand. There's a riser on the inside of the motherboard which prevents it from touching. Now this is grounded. Problem is you don't want the motherboard components to touch the metal, or else it will short and it won't power on. So we're going to take each screw, Most of them have about 9 or 12. Put it on top, spin it, lefty loosey, ready tighty, pull them, put them to the side. I'm going to do one by one. Doesn't matter which order you put them in. I usually put them back in a different order, just so that way the tightening is even. Now I want to remove all the screws. This one. There's always going to be one or two on this side to hold the motherboard in where the PCI connections are. This one has 2 of them. And there's one right here. This is a mid type of micro ATX motherboard. They have mini ITX, Pico motherboard, and then full size. The mini ITX motherboards cut pretty much this whole entire half of the motherboard off down here, and it comes to about right where the memory is, and that's depending on the sizes. They vary from 9-inch, 6 inches. Now this, of course, will be rearranged, so the board's a lot smaller. Usually it comes to about here. Just got to find whatever fits best. If you're doing custom projects like we've done in the past, you want the right size for the custom build. And if you need something built or want something built, we'll provide you with information so you can get a hold of us. Once all the screws are removed, it has a little pin out here. This one's made out of copper, but that's just to keep the motherboard in place, so when you put it down, you don't need a screw, it just holds it. See how here it's lifting? You want to lift from the back side and then slide it towards the front. Lift at an angle and then rise it. If you see any cables, just remove it. That's the motherboard. The reason why we're removing it is we're going to take the heatsink off. Here's the input output, the I/O panels, we have the audio. Every motherboard is different. This has onboard graphics, which we don't use because we use a graphics card. And this is what we will be removing. Every motherboard has a different layout. This looks like an X. Most of them just an X clamp. Now these are screwed into. The new Xboxes have weird little latches if you've ever taken one apart. I've taken plenty apart to repair them. But this is the back side. That's why if you take a look at here, they have these copper risers. This one's loose, as you can tell. You want them nice and tight. The reasons why you have these, in case some motherboards, like you can see here, if your motherboard, if you go to replace this motherboard here with something else, you decide to upgrade any components or the entire thing, then you would look at where the holes would go for the screws and move these where they would need to be. So in this case, we're putting the same motherboard back in, so we don't need to remove them. Just make sure these are tight. I mean, these are finger loose. We're going to go ahead and tighten them. Not by hand, we're actually going to use a tool to tighten these. You can also use pliers, not wire snips. You can just grab around there. It's like a little hexagonal shape. You can unscrew them, and these just come right out. You have different thread patterns. So there's ones that are smaller, ones that are bigger. And they're just little risers. And you put these back in. The reasons why you want them nice and tight is because if you go to unscrew the motherboard, it may come out with this riser. So you want to make sure these are nice and tight. We went ahead and moved the entire case onto the floor. Since it's nothing inside of it right now, we're going to be working with the motherboard. This is a lot easier to work with it out of the case. We're going to go ahead and be removing the old heatsink and the processor. Now Intel processors, you can take a look, they don't have pins on the back of them. It's just a flat piece. AMD actually has the pins that come from here. So if you are working with a pinned layout with an AMD processor, they do make different types of layouts where these for Intel have a little notch here. The layout for the pins for AMD is for AMD's level of what type of processor you get. They have AM2, they have AM3s, AM2 pluses, AM3 pluses. There's little notches cut out where it can only go in one way. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to go upgrade a processor, make sure that your motherboard is compatible and always put it in the right way. You can tell here there's a notch. There isn't one on the other side. We'll show you once we get to that point where this goes, and it only goes in one direction. So we'll put this to the side. We're going to take a screwdriver. Every system is different. We're going to be upgrading it with a bigger, way bigger heatsink. What we're going to do is we're going to remove the screws one by one. This one's a lot easier. Just remove the screws. Try to make this a lot faster. Once this is out, lift it, put it to the side. Now some of them, if they already have a little plastic support system, AMD does that. And if your new heatsink just has a little latch, you don't need to remove the motherboard. Just put the new system on. There's a little metal bracket that comes across. Slide the bracket over the plastic piece, move it on the other side, push it down, make sure it's nice in place, and you're good to go. In this case, we're removing it, so we want to remove all the screws. Once they're all removed, you want to go ahead and lift slowly. If you're working with an AMD system or an older Pentium, if you go to lift it and the processor comes out with it, don't force it. So just wiggle it and then lift, and it comes right off. Now this has a copper base. On the inside there's a copper tube that keeps the heat inside, and the fan spins, and as you can tell, it blows the heat around, so it doesn't keep in the centralized area. Processor we're upgrading, this is a Core 2. We're upgrading it to an Intel Extreme processor. It's a quad core. This is a Core 2 Duo. It's a dual core. The speeds are drastic. This is a 2.0 and that is a 2.66, I believe, and it's a quad core. So it's double the speed, double the size. This front side bus is 800 megahertz, and that one is 1066. That's why we also upgraded to the additional memory, because that's the maximum supported by this is 8 gigs. So we'll go ahead. This has a latch. Every setup is different, so keep that in mind to your specific system. Make sure that the latch comes out, lifts up, and it does have a lot of tension. You can tell it has a lot of tension. Pull this back, grab it from here, lift up. Once the latch is up, there's a mechanism, push this way, this goes back. There's grooves inside where you can pretty much grab your fingers and then lift it straight up. Now thermal paste, you can remove it prior to doing this step. We're going to do it afterwards. I'm going to show you how to remove it. Just grab it here. You may get some on your hand. Just make sure you don't get any on the pins. Now because the AMD has it on here, they have a different layout. Intel does theirs on the main motherboard. So you're conscious of not putting your fingers anywhere near there, pushing them down, pressing them down. As you can tell, this, they have the same groove. Now Intel has this layout for many chipsets. You want to keep in mind that your compatibility is referenced to your specific board. So make sure that it's compatible with the speeds, compatible with, you can even do a quad core. If you're limited to a specific brand, check on your manufacturer's motherboard to see compatible lists of your processors and memory. So you don't want to invest in something and then not have it work for you. What you want to do then is we're going to put the new one in. Put this to the side. This is the new Intel Extreme processor. MSRP for this when it came out was over $1,000. Now you can get them pretty cheap, anywhere. But it's nice and clean. You can't really tell. There's a little holographic lettering that happens. It tells you the manufacturer, which is Intel, the specific brand version of it, the model number, the speeds, the revision. They all have different types of revisions when they were manufactured. And this only goes in one way. So you match the grooves in the same way. So this fits in this direction. If you take a look at the motherboard, it only goes in one way. So you want to grab it on one side, don't force anything down, and then just let it set in place. Once that's in place, you grab this side of the latch down, grab this side of the latch, push it down, and then slide it inward. That'll take care of the processor. That's seated, it's not going anywhere. We'll go ahead and show you how it is to remove thermal paste if you're going to reapply, or if you're just changing this.
to a processor. Since we're applying new thermal compound to the processor now, we can avoid doing that step for the new heatsink. We'll just apply thermal compound straight away. We're doing this on just a plastic surface. It's fine. If you have an AMD, I don't recommend you do this out of the case, out of the CPU housing case, the motherboard. But since we're just cleaning this off, it's okay. They do sell products that remove thermal compound. It's very expensive. And what we use is 91% isopropyl alcohol. You can purchase this anywhere. The higher the isopropyl, the better it is. It breaks down the thermal compound and it dries very quickly. It won't soak in or anything after a while. Just let it air dry before you put it back in. This stuff's very cheap. You can get it anywhere. We use a sock, which is kind of funny. We don't use paper towels. Reason why is it's lint free. You don't want any lint getting on anywhere. You don't want it to affect the thermal compound. You can tell this thing's taking a beating already. It's very thick. You can get any type of socks. You can just throw this in the washer and you can reuse it. You don't have to waste paper towels, and it's very cost effective. So what you want to do is you want to grab some of the isopropyl alcohol, find the spot that isn't on here, that hasn't been used, pour some on there, and then literally hold and then just wipe off. It comes right off. Now this is Arctic Silver 5. It's a thermal compound. Add a little bit more and then just wipe it off. We did this because one, it's easier to show on film. Two, I didn't want to do this inside the case with all the cables. Just make sure it's nice and clean. And the good thing about having something like this is you can grab just a corner, a nice dry corner, get it nice in the groove. Paper towel likes to break when you get your hands all wet. You want to have everything be controlled. Got a little bit more, we'll finish off. And then we're going to actually put this processor in another build. It's always good to keep, additional parts if something doesn't work. You want to have extra parts laying around. And for the most part, if you would get any of this stuff on the copper pins, it's okay. Just grab this and run them over. Just make sure those aren't covered, because in this case we don't have anything on there. Just remove that and this is ready to go on another PC. And we'll just put this to the side. We have this pad down, so it's not going to have any static or anything, so you'll be good. The new one's already on here. I like to wipe off any type of oils from your hand or fingerprints. That's why we use isopropyl alcohol. Cleans off any type of agents, any type of oils in your hands. And then just go ahead and wipe the surface of the new processor off that you're installing. If it's an older one, wipe off any thermal compound off of it. As you can tell, the old heatsink has some on there. So we're going to go ahead and clean off the heatsink and the fan, the original heatsink that was on here, just so we can reuse it in our next project. We're actually building just a smaller, not anything crazy performance, just a small little mini gaming build with the old components we had in here. We're going to reuse the processor, use the RAM that wasn't in here, just so there's another motherboard. It's always good to just reuse it, and if we don't, we'll sell it, we'll upgrade it, or we'll hold it for another client that just may not be as fortunate to upgrade anything or may not have the money. Just clean it. Once it's done, put it off to the side. Okay, these are the pieces that are needed to put the heatsink support for the new heatsink fan on the motherboard. Now, if you have an Intel or AMD, they'll have different setup. They have different notches inside. This is usually generally for Intel or AMD, depending on your motherboard layout. It may be like this, it may be angled. This is normally attached on the inside, like this, and then gets screwed in place. There's a notch inside, you can see in there. This would go through the inside to hold the support, to strap it downwards onto this bracket. But in our case, we're going to apply this to the motherboard, and we'll show you how to do that. On the back side, there usually is a support clamp, an X support system. In this case, we're going to check and see if these screw into it, and if they do, we don't have to remove this at all. The reasons why they have these support pieces are in case this clamp isn't here, being the case that if you upgrade it to a different non-motherboard manufacturer fan, you may not have this piece, so they give you additional components to screw this in place. And in our case, we're going to check it out real quick, see if these have the same groove pattern, and if they do fit, we'll just keep them. And in our case, it does. So we're going to keep the original X-clamp. Pull up on it. If there's a lot of wiggle room, this does, but once it goes farther, it doesn't. So make sure that the thread pattern is the same. So we're just going to go ahead and unscrew this. Take this piece. Now you have to really figure out which direction you're going to want to put this fan in. In our case, see it sits down. And then we have the screws for this. So we'll check placement for this. We'll see how much clearance we have from here, from the power supply that we're going to be putting in place, and everything will clear. You always want to put the fan towards the back, and we will show you once it's put in place why this is. We have an external exhaust fan in the case. It'll blow all the heat out. If you have an aftermarket case, you'll have fans on top that blow heat out. You can flip it upward. In our case, this will only go one way. So you can put it this way. Sometimes it'll match, in this case it does. But at times you won't have clearance here because of this heatsink here. So we're going to do it this way. And then this will show you the direction of where you need to clamp. So we want a little bit more room over here. We're going to do it like this. And then have it blow this way. We're going to go ahead. Since we know that the bracket does fit and the screws match the thread pattern, they do come with these little plastic pieces that are supposed to attach onto the motherboard, but we're going to use them to attach into here so there's no strain on the plastic support. Sometimes they crack and we don't want that to happen. So there's a direction here how they're going to go in, and you can see this. These will get screwed into here, so we won't need to worry about direction. The reason why they use this is if you go to replace the heatsink with the factory one, you don't have to replace this anymore. This usually comes with the AMD builds, so latch it like we spoke about earlier. So we're going to go ahead and put these little clear plastic pieces through, and then we're going to screw them in place one by one. Plastic on the fade, and put that through there, and then we're going to line it up. So go ahead and screw these in place. You don't have to worry about anything touching the motherboard because there's no power to it, so make sure that these are being screwed properly. Put this through here. For some reason you go to tighten them and they don't feel like they're grabbing properly, or they're just not threading. You may not have it properly seated correctly. In this case, that's this problem with this one. What you do is just lift it, make sure it's in the right place, and then slowly screw it back in. Short centered, which in our case it is. Just tighten them. You don't want too much force because you don't want to break it. Tighten this. Tighten this one. And tighten this one. Make sure that these are nice and tight one last time. You don't put too much tension on there, you don't want to break it, it is plastic. That's in place, it's not going anywhere. Now we're in the thermal paste process, thermal compound. They do bring some that comes with the original heatsink. You can use that if you didn't purchase any. The stuff we're applying is kind of expensive. You have different choices and variations of thermal grease, thermal compound, thermal paste. Okay, the one that we're going to be using isn't this. We're going to keep this for another project or we'll give this to a client or customer in case they go to change it on their own. In this case, this is a personal build, so we don't really have to worry about this. I'll keep this. There's different variations that you can get. One we're using now is Arctic Silver 5. A lot of you may know what that is. Pretty much is one of the top end on the market. This is a silver-based thermal compound. You don't want to get this on anything other than the processor. And we'll show you how to properly apply this. There's different methods of doing so. This is another one from, I believe, Antec. Like I stated prior, there's different manufacturers. This is a lot thicker, more like smoother, creamier looking thermal compound. Some of them are really watery. You don't want anything watery, that's the biggest thing. If you go to buy and it's really watery, it's usually crap. If they have white, which is usually made from ceramic, you don't want to use them on high end. They're not going to work as good. And then at times you may have, they come with a manufacturer, stickers if you want to put them from there. You might have a pad like this that is an actual compound sticker. You remove the one side, apply it, remove the other side, then put the heatsink on. Or on the heatsink you may see that they already have a gray sticker on there. You can use that. I usually use, products that we have that we know works. Sometimes it's really cheap. You don't really want to go ahead and use what they have at times. But if you don't have anything, you can go ahead and use it. You can tell it's extremely shiny. We're going to go ahead and wipe anything off, any dust, any fingerprints. I'm going to apply some alcohol on there, isopropyl, just to get any of our oils off, any of our fingerprints. You can tell it's extremely shiny. Get it nice and cleaned off. Put a nice smooth surface. We had already cleaned this. So what you want to do is, prior to putting installation of the fan, you're going to want to take whichever thermal compound you decide to choose on, open the cap. You'll see it's a tube. You want to put a pea size right in the center. You might see people go ahead and spread it. Most of the dies on the processors, this is how manufacturers do it. If you get a little run, that's fine. You want to put enough, not too much. So about the size of a pea. Then close it back up. You might see people spread it the whole way across. From testing ourselves and from other people who've tested it, manufacturers, that if you do spread it, it doesn't always hold contact. The chips are right in the center, the processors, and they're very tiny. So you want the central focus of the heat to be spread outward from the inside of the core. If you spread it out, it may not have full contact. So when this is pressured down, it pressures the paste outwards and it pretty much coats the entire processor evenly. So you don't have to worry about spreading it. What you do is you go ahead, grab this specific heat sink that we're using. Okay, so you want to place it down, try to get it as even as possible. If you don't have it perfect, it's okay. Once you apply pressure, it will spread out evenly. You're going to put it on, make sure it's centered. If you don't have it quite centered, it's okay. Once you apply pressure, the thermal compound will spread evenly, so you don't have to worry about it there. Make sure the holes align as best you can. This has a weird type of clamp here. What you want to do is then grab the additional screws. The reason why there's 4, the layout on here may be different. So if your motherboard needs these, because at times you may need to flip it upside down, your application is different. Just read the instructions, very important, always read through. You want to grab the screw, slide it through the one side. Don't screw it in the whole entire way, just enough to hold it. Come to the other side. Now you'll have tension on this side, that's what you want. So you may need to apply some pressure, some force. Screw it in. Don't screw it in the whole way down just yet. Make sure it's centered to where you want it. It won't really move too much. I'm saying centered because it angles itself left to right. Once it's in place, be very careful of the fan in the front, because if you break any of the fins, it will vibrate and you won't be able to use it anymore. Once it's in place, and you can't twist it anymore, just finger tighten it. 1, 2, and on the back side again. 1, 2. That's not going anywhere. Even if it moves a little bit, it's fine. It's already pressured down. Once the thermal paste dries, it's not going to go anywhere. There's a little rubber band, little sleeve. Slide it off. This will unwind. There's your 4-pin connector for the motherboard. Now normally, if you would want, you can move it down underneath here before you apply that. We like letting it loose because we're going to cable manage it. So on this side right here, we'll go ahead and apply the 4-pin connector to the 4-pin fan header. What I like doing is, since this doesn't really put too much heat on the inside, you can go ahead and fold it. Fold it again, so that way when it's here, you can then either reattach the rubber band. There's a lot of play. We go ahead and get some zip ties. These you can purchase anywhere. This is a 100-pack, I believe, yes. You can open them. They come in different thicknesses, sizes. This is the 4-inch ones. Just grab one. It'll let me grab it out. And what we'll do is, it only goes in one way. There's teeth on one side, clear on the other side. There's nothing, very smooth. Just grab it, fold it, slide it through. Once you start hearing the zip, that's why they call it a zip tie. Try to get it as tight as possible. If you can't bend it anymore, don't force it, because you want a little bit of play. So just fold it to the best of your ability. And in our case, we want a little bit of play. Push the zip tie the entire way. And there you go. Then you take your wire snips, cut the plastic, and that's it. Have just enough play in case you need to reroute anything. You don't want this to get stuck inside where the fan's chopping it up either. So you always want a little bit of play in case you need to move this somewhere. And this is the full installation of the heatsink. This isn't going anywhere. We're going to go ahead and we're going to install the memory before we put this back into the case. So we're going to rotate it, and I will show you how to install and seat the memory properly. Now you'll see that they come in sets. We have 4 sticks here, but there's a 2-kit stick set that came together, and then the additional RAM sticks were purchased separately. So what you want to do is you want to match the manufacturer grouping code. So as you can tell, it has the ID, the speed, the type of memory, and this is the number we're looking for. So you want to match those numbers up. See how this says 04933, this one says 04933. We want to stick these in the same color slots. So we're going to go ahead and take care of that. I'm going to grab these, make sure they're in the same position. In this case, if we put it like this and we line it up, this is too far down. So they're going to be facing this way. You want to open the latches outward on all 4 since we're installing 4. If you're only installing 2, only install the 2 colored ones. You can choose black or blue in our case. Sometimes they may be green and white, whichever color motherboard they do vary, or they may be all black. Just check with your motherboard manufacturer. They'll tell you whether or not these are individualized dual channel and what colors or what position they need to put in. You grab the stick, make sure you line it up, seat it, and then apply pressure on one side, apply pressure on the other side. Don't be afraid, just make sure the clip is pushed in. Hear that snap? This is already done on this side. The other 04933, you want to put this in the blue slot as well. And then you push this side in, push this side in, push the clip. And now we'll go ahead with putting the additional sticks that don't quite match. So we're going to put these in here. Even though they're all the same speeds, they're not an actual kit. So you want to make sure that the ones that are a kit go in their individual spaces. And then push this one down. That's in place. And then we're going to go ahead and put this one in place. Not always the sticker will be on the right side, so just want to make sure that they fit in the groove. Click here, click there, push in, and we're ready to go. And that's motherboard. We're going to take the time. We're going to put the case back up. We'll show you the new power supply. We will put the motherboard in, we'll put the power supply in, and then we'll wrap everything up. On to the next step. We're going to show you guys now how to put the motherboard back in and how to do it properly. You want to make sure that if you do replace the motherboard, you change the I/O plate. This only goes in one direction. Make sure that you check the motherboard prior to putting the I/O in. This comes in from the inside. There's a groove here. So what you do is you pop it out, slide it through, and then it sits in place. So you can put this and put it up against here. And this covers up any of these blank holes, which is why there's an I/O input. So you want to take your motherboard, slide it in this way. Make sure that everything fits nice and neat, and there you go. Everything's nice and in place. Now we're going to go ahead and put the screws in. Make sure that when you go to purchase a heatsink, it clears your case. Some heat sinks are larger, so make sure when you do invest, you measure things or check on the measurements prior to doing this. You can always take a tape measure, touch the bottom of the case, and see if you have enough clearance. We're going to go ahead and put the screws for the motherboard. They're all here. So you take each screw, line it up. Now I do the full tightening at the very end, so just tighten them enough till they hold in place. We'll put these here. Just be careful if you run your hand, these will cut you. I've cut myself a million times, so that's what you hear now is my hand rubbing up against them. Try not to bend them because they're very hard to fix again, so keep that in mind. Run these for the bottom. We will be installing the new power supply after this, so I'm just running through showing you guys how to do this properly. Make sure as well that if you're going to do a mod like we did for the fans, that the new heatsink clears. The fan just barely touches. If you look at it from this angle, right here, there's a gap. It's about a quarter inch. Just enough to clear the heat, and since it's full copper, it shouldn't get that hot. Temps should be around 30 to 40 under full load. So, and that's with the Intel Extreme. It may go hotter in the winter time if you live somewhere where it's got a lot of heat, or in the summertime if you keep the computer in a very hot environment. Something to keep in mind as well. So there's only 4 screws left, and those screws are going to be for the power supply. Make sure you put all the components, like the fan header, back on, and the other fan header for this mod, which we just put back on, and then the one for the fan for the heatsink. Everything's nice and snug. We're going to go ahead and put in the power supply, so we'll be right back. This was the original one that it came with. This is an aftermarket Antec. See the 380 watt, which was okay to run the 9600 GT. This is a 700 watt power supply. We had this in here at one point in time. This one changes different colors of the fan. This is a Corsair 700 series. We need at least a 400, and we need at least a 400 plus, probably a 500, because the processor in here is a lot higher wattage. So the standard one that was in here is 65 watt. This is a 90 watt, I believe. So it ups the wattage. This is gonna more than do enough for the entire system. So we're gonna go ahead and install the bigger one, as well as you can tell the pinouts. On the back you'll see that it has, this one specifically changes the fan LED, so the fan will change colors. It'll go from white to red to blue and then off, and then here's the power switch. See how in this one, the old one didn't have a fan on the bottom, and if you see the difference in variation, they're a lot different. The size of it's the same, the length of it is different, so it's a little bit, it's probably close to ½ an inch to an inch bigger. You can tell by the sides. So it's something you may want to keep in mind when you're upgrading. So we'll go ahead and install this one. How you do that is the exact same way for the other one. The holes, you want to make sure that they line up with the ones on the back of the case. So here's this one's up a little bit higher, so we know this goes in. Normally you want the fan to face downward into the case. We're going to go ahead and install it, make sure there's nothing in the way. Lift this up a little bit. You're going to take your screws, and then you want to line this up. Lift it up a little bit. Most of the time it needs just a little bit of work to get it in place. Start on the bottom, give it a little more support, and then you go to the top. So I'm just going to do this one by hand, just to get the few threads in first. I don't screw them in the whole way until I have the entire set of screws screwed in and in place. Once everything is screwed in place, then we tighten the rest of the screws. This is a little bit weightier power supply. The bigger they are, the heavier they get. Different components on the inside. More power, more components. That's nice and snug. It's not going anywhere from the inside. So any air that blows through here, it's already blowing out and blowing out. So this PC is going to run really cool. Fans from the processor outward. Both of these fans are outward fans. There isn't any inlet fans. It sucks air through the vents through here, blows air through the case, so that's fresh air. There isn't a place here for a fan, or else we would put one in. And once that's all installed, we're going to go ahead and put the PCI Express and the Ethernet card back in. I want to show you the PCI Express covers. Here, this one doesn't have any. This is the PCI cover. So in this case, ours is just a slide one. You have to push up and this slides out. In some cases you have to physically unscrew. The reason why we're taking two is the new card is a 2-slot card compared to the other one, which is just a 1-slot card. We're going to take the graphics card, we're going to slide it, make sure that the holes line up with the motherboard right here for the PCI Express connection. And then you see how we took up 2 slots instead of 1. You can focus on here and you can see that it takes up 2 slots instead of just 1 slot originally. And what you want to do is just apply a little bit of pressure. Once you hear a nice click, you'll know it's in place. This isn't coming out. Force it down a little bit. If you apply a little bit of pressure, it isn't going to do any damage. Grab these screws. And then I usually start with the center one. There's a groove in here to allow me to do so. I usually force it up just a little bit, just apply a little bit of pressure. I don't screw it the whole way tight until the other one's on. Just make sure that you get a hold of it. And then once that's nice and in place, tighten them. Not going anywhere. Now we can put the Ethernet card in. Grab this, place it back in, apply a little bit of pressure, and you put the screw in. Now you may want to, before this step, put in the front panel USB and the the audio or the audio, but since it has enough space for us to do it, we're just gonna grab it, just slide it through and put it in place. And once we get this in there, we're gonna put this one, which is the firewire. I don't personally use it, I have disabled, but since it's here I don't want it floating around the motherboard inside of the case. And then we'll go ahead and install the USB. This has two front USBs, the one on the bottom half and the top half. We put this one away from the closer one. If it's too short or if it's too long, you can move them around. Just move these forward just up a little bit so we can clear away from the SATA connectors. And then here's where that shot of the front panel switches. So whenever you hit your power, hard drive LED and your power LED, and that's where that screenshot on a phone comes in handy, or if you wrote it down, wrote the colors and the patterns down, is where that would come extremely handy. We're gonna go ahead and grab our phone quick and take a look and put these in. I know this one goes in this way, it's the only one. And then the other ones, this is actually color coded. You can take a look in the inside. This is color coded. Right here it's color coded. And at times it makes it a lot easier to understand which colors go where. So if you didn't take a screenshot and you didn't know where it went, just follow the colors. In this case we have an orange. This is the hard drive LED. You can see that the orange matches the orange. And we'll verify with everything. And then the power switch. And the reset switch. Once you've got your color combination correct and installed, you can go ahead and install your SATA cable. So you just plug it in, match the shape of it. It's like a little L shape with the motherboard. You can see there's that shape. Push it in. Make sure the clip part, it only goes in one direction. If you try to put it upside down, there's a groove here. It won't let you. Put it the right way. Once you hear that click, it's in place. Move that to the side. We're actually going to be zip tying that. Then we're going to go ahead. Now this, since we've already previously installed, what you do is you bundle them and then you zip tie them together, so that way they're nice and neatly grouped. Makes your job a lot easier. I wouldn't do this prior to installing it. I would do this afterwards, but like I stated, we have already had this in the case at one point in time, so waiting for this upgrade, so we took ahead and did this already. Now they have zip ties in different colors, so we went ahead and did that. Here's a 24 pin, it's 20 plus 4, and then you match it on the motherboard. Prior to doing this, we want to make sure that the floppy drive is installed. So you just match where it's missing the pin. It's missing the pin here. Put this back inside. Sometimes it gets to become a jumbled mess. Push it into the slot. Like I said, we don't really use it too often. So now you want to grab 24 pin. Put it in the slot. Make sure it's going the right way. You need to remember how to take it back off. You just push and press the clip and slide it back up. It only goes in one way. Make sure you hear it click. Tug on it, everything's fine. And these are grouped. This is a 6 pin that we're going to use. This is an attachment for an 8 pin for larger graphics cards. Sometimes they need dual 8 pin, sometimes they only need one 6 pin, but they give you the option with the newer power supplies to upgrade it to an 8 pin. So we're going to leave this one down. There is a dual 4 pin. This is for motherboards only. They have them attached. They split up. It actually clips together. what you do is you pull them apart. They have these little tabs that hold them together. You only need one. So you want to run this through the top. This is actually going to be installed ahead of this, so we'll leave this for last. We're going to push this in. We're going to run this back here, and then we're only going to install one of the 4 pins. Now normally if you have a capacitor, this is a capacitor, on this side you want to use the right side, so that way it has more room for the 4 pin to sit here neatly. And this gets plugged in. Sometimes it gets tricky. Watch the heat sink fan, because you don't want to bend any of the fins. And then plug it in. Takes a little bit of work, but don't be afraid. Just be very careful you don't cut yourself. Once that's installed, you want to push these down, and then we will secure everything with zip ties. Then there's a mess, so you got to kind of figure out which steps next. This one goes to the floppy, so we'll leave that one out. This one goes to the SATA, we'll drop this one. And then this one goes to the graphics card. So all these are additional. We only need one for the DVD drive. So this is the only one we will need. And then the other 2 can get hidden. So we will put these, fold them. This is for the floppy. And then we will put these in the spare slot. The reason why I'm not zip tying these together is just in case we go to upgrade a component, I won't waste a zip tie. So then you put this in here. This goes for the power. This case doesn't really leave too much cable management, so I would invest in an aftermarket case if you're looking to do an upgrade. They're a lot nicer, they're a lot more spacious, so you have more to work with. We'll do the same thing with this one. In. We'll zip tie everything to make sure it's all in place. If it's giving you troubles, use the opposite end. You want to plug it in. It only goes one direction, so we just got to figure out which one we're going to end up using, which in this case I want to use the one that gives me the least amount of problems. Push these down, push these in. Okay, once all the cables are all set in there, and the power cables on the DVD drive, you want to run this along, and then you want to attach the SATA power connector to the hard drive, and then we're going to cable manage this down here, and we're going to zip tie these together, and then we're going to zip tie the SATA cable. So we're going to grab the zip ties, grab one. We want these together because they can be detached as one whole unit. This can be detached separately, and then we'll attach all 3 of them to this slot right here. So we'll grab the zip tie, spin it, make sure it's all nice and neat, and then zip tie it right here. I usually cut the end of the zip tie last, so this extra I cut it at the very end. Then, to make sure everything stays in here, we'll run a zip tie through here. Actually, I'll run it backwards. If you can't get it this way, then you can do it the other way. I like it this way because it doesn't leave a nub on here. There you go. And now if you put the case, it doesn't lock up. And then we'll grab another zip tie. We're going to zip tie the SATA cable. So you just grab them, run the zip tie like this. If it's flat, fold it. It's the best way it works. So bunch it together, and then just zip tie it nice and tight. You don't want it too tight, because sometimes if it's too tight it'll cut through the plastic, depending on type of quality SATA cable you may have purchased. This one I usually cut right away just because it's always in the way. Grab it, watch your fingers, cut it, make sure that the motherboard's attached. Then this is the power 6-pin for the graphics card. This is the little clip part. Slide it in, push it, nice and snug, it's not coming out. Make sure you apply a little bit of pressure. And then this will come right here. We're going to zip tie these together, and then I'm going to zip tie the power cable right here. So try to keep cable management nice and neat. Now you could leave it the way that it currently is, but you want to make sure that everything stays nice and neat. So we grab a zip tie, you run it through here. This has a little bit more of an inlet, so we can do it this direction. And if it's not long enough, like in this case, you may want to invest in bigger zip ties, because this just won't cut it. So I have bigger zip ties this size. These are 8-inch. They're twice the size. Now, I already gone ahead and cut this one off. So this is too small, it won't fit in here. You may want to invest. You can see the size difference. 4-inch, 8-inch. Now this is a lot stronger. It's heavier duty. That's why it's called heavy duty. Now you want to slide it underneath. Slide it through the inlet. And then we're going to zip tie all these together. The reason why we're doing these is to make sure everything's nice and neat and inside of the case. So once that's in there, like I said, I usually cut them last. In case we need to move anything around, we have enough play. We're going to go ahead and zip tie this just to keep it nice and clean. I mean, we can leave it hang around, but I like to keep things clean. There's another zip tie. Choose the smaller one. Reasons why you want to cable manage. This goes out to my buddy Caesar. He said, hey man, I want to see some more cable managing. This isn't like when you build a custom rig. Normally you do a lot of cable management behind the case, but in this case it works specifically in this case to the sense if you're running into this situation, it goes to show you that you can cable manage in a smaller case and not make it look really rough. So once these are zip tied and in place, this is in place, this is the last cable that needs to be plugged in. So you want to run this. This is the IDE cable. I'm going to run it right inside the groove. And the reason why I specifically did this one last is in case we needed to reroute it, we could do so. Now, every application is different. Newer computers don't even have IDE cables. Once this is run through, everything's nice and neat. If you would want, you can zip tie this to here. We don't really have too much play. You can actually remove this and put this on the inside, which I may just do right now. I'm just gonna remove this, slide this over, push this towards the inside, and then put the power cable right back in. And then now everything's nice and neat. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna cut the rest of the zip ties, and then cut the zip tie. And there you go. The interior of the case has been cable managed. This is okay if it's like this as long as it's down. Make sure all the power cables are attached and everything's good. This is out of the way of the fan. So we're going to take a nice little pan and I will show you one of the most important parts prior to putting the panel on and finishing the build. I'm going to lift the case up. If you have a case as such, it's older case, you may run into the situation where the panel itself has this. It's an intake fan. If you have the same kind of heatsink that was on there before, like this, what this does is it sits on the motherboard, the inlet fan covers over top of it, and it sucks the fresh air from the outside of the case directly on the CPU. That provides cool air and better airflow, and it keeps the case from getting dust everywhere. So we won't be able to use this because you can see when we would put this on here, it's pretty much useless and it touches the new heatsink. This is only about probably half an inch to an inch from the physical case. we won't need it. It's got enough airflow. So we're going to go ahead and remove it. What to do is larger screws than this. Unscrew it. Remove the screw. There's one. And the whole entire assembly comes off. This does have a dust filter. They do sell them separately. Now if you would want to put this dust filter, let's say on the back fan, you could take the fan off and put the dust filter on it. It comes off, and this is how that works. Once this is removed, flip this around. That's the full build. Make sure the case slides on. There you go. Now you can invest in case screws instead of having the standard layout. These are thicker and they provide a little bit more play, so when you go to unscrew it, you can easily get them on and off. And there you have it. And if you want to see and make sure everything is working, make sure the power switch is functioning, we'll show you the front of the case. Okay, we took the panel off. We're gonna do the initial startup. We don't have it connected to anything, but we want to make sure that everything's powering up. So we will start it up, plug in the power, make sure the switch is on. You'll see lights kick on the case. And this completes our build. I just want to do a shout out to Jordan, to Eddie, hopefully this helps you out, to Caesar for asking me to show some of the cable management. I thank everyone for supporting me thus far at Louie's Custom PCs. I do this for a living and I love doing it. I wouldn't do anything else, and I hope that if you're starting, you know, you start somewhere small as a project like this, doing small upgrades, and I hope that you may have learned a few things along the way. Okay, that completes our video. I will continue to make videos. This is just a start. I'm trying to repeat myself.